Welcome to part 3 of our Starting Strength series discussion with our friend Joe Ladnier. Joe's one of the most remarkable power lifters from the early and middle 1980s, and Joe was there in the development of the United States' heyday in powerlifting back in the 1980s. Joe, thank you for being with us again. And what I thought we'd do, if you guys have seen the first 2 episodes of this interview, we've touched on so many great lifters from back in the day, and Joe knew a lot of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shoot some names at Joe, and we're just going to see if we can coax a story or 2 out of him.
That'd be fun.
Okay, so let's start with Pacifico. We talked about Pacifico's team, and we talked about his contribution to the sport, but we hadn't really talked about Larry. He's important. Tell us just a little bit about Larry. We're going to have to deal with several of these people. We haven't got time for a long discussion of everybody, but I think Larry needs to be talked about.
Larry deserves a lot of credit for my training back in the early days. A lot of it, especially when he introduced me to the bodybuilding side, the accessory work and all that I converted into my powerlifting that I still use today. I use a lot of that today, a lot of that training today. Larry is a very professional person, and with that, he kind of got on people's bad sides. You either liked him or hated him.
Right.
And he had a lot of friends, but he had a lot of enemies too.
I remember that.
A lot of the lifters from back then, they didn't care too much for him, and me being 19 years old and not knowing,
right,
and just coming up on top of the sport the way I was kind of listening to everybody.
Well, you probably weren't even in a position to form an opinion about it at that time.
Right, exactly.
Being 19.
And Jan and Terry Todd, they had their opinions. Doug Young had his opinion. There was Doyle Kennedy. There were so many of the lifters from Larry's day, mm-hmm, that were coming to me about things that I didn't know about,
right,
and I couldn't really form an opinion about because I wasn't there and didn't know.
You were 19.
I was just kind of soaking it in, listening, right, to it, and then being aware of my situation. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It was a good experience. It was a good and bad experience, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. What about Doyle Kennedy? Doyle is a iconic. Most people just remember the way he looked. He has that mountain man look. Great big giant beard, big deadlift,
big hairy body,
big hairy guy, big archetypal Paul Bunyan looking guy.
Yeah, super nice guy. I mean, just.
He was from Washington, wasn't he? Washington State?
Washington or Oregon, somewhere
over there on Northwest.
Just a super nice guy. I met his daughter not too long ago. Through the internet I met her, but somebody had made a post about him, posted a picture about him, and a lot of people were commenting, and I commented, and she came on there and commented, and then we started chit-chatting back and mm-hmm forth, but the only time I really got to know him was at the World Championships when he was the coach of the World Championships that year. Mm-hmm. But I got to spend several hours with him, and it was a great conversation. Right. Learned a lot, right, with him.
What about Fred Hatfield?
Fred, he's one of those guys that's been in and out of my life since the beginning, mm-hmm, even to this day. I spoke to him not too long ago, asking his opinion on something over the internet. Fred had prostate cancer not too long ago, mm-hmm, and went on a keto diet and beat it. he's cancer-free now. Been cancer-free for several years. Was on the 700 Club show talking about it, how he beat it. Remarkable guy.
Founder of the ISSA. Been
Dr.
tremendous
Squad.
influence throughout powerlifting and now throughout the business we're in.
And ironically, he just started lifting again himself.
Did he?
Training with his new wife, and he posted a picture on the internet where he had a trainer at the gym. At the gym he's
Oh,
at.
that's an interesting experience for him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Lee Moran. We just got through talking about Lee Moran during the break, and Lee was I know you wanted to talk about Lee. Lee was a maniac. He was what a
Lee
figure in the sport. God,
Lee should have been a comedian.
Like
He
a
was-
meteoric rise and
Man, he was
just
such
went
a
away.
comical guy. He kept you rolling in stitches. We competed both in the Hawaii Invitational in 1984, and hung out together that whole week. And I really got to know Lee, and he was man, could he drink some beer? Oh my God, could he drink beer? Like water.
Well, he was a big, huge guy too.
Oh, my God.
Well, he's a 300-pound guy, wasn't he?
We had rented a car, a Toyota Corolla.
You two guys in a Toyota.
I was a
How do you do
242-pounder. Lee was my height. He was 5'7", and he weighed 330 pounds.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we were sitting in this car, shoulder to shoulder, driving like this. 1984.
Oh, that would have been quite a picture. You don't have a picture of that.
No, I don't.
Oh, God.
But
What a
Lee
deal.
bombed out at that meet with a 600-pound bench press. And ironically, the next day we went to the gym, and Lee took 600 pounds out of the rack himself and pressed
Without
it.
a handoff.
Without a handoff. And stood up and said, now why couldn't I have done that at the meet?
Wow.
The very next day.
Wow. That's amazing. What had happened? Couldn't lock it out? Or?
Just couldn't lock it out, no. I
Hell
guess
of a
the
deal.
big squat got to his shoulders.
Yeah.
He opened too
I
heavy.
guess something like that. But
Yeah.
God, those of you kids that are watching this just have no idea what went on back.
I was there
then.
the year the bar exploded with Lee at the 1984 Senior Nationals.
Sleeve slipped off the
Yep.
end of the bar, and nobody was somehow killed.
Right.
Somehow,
Flipped
everybody lived through. That's amazing.
Flipped a 100-pound plate about 10 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And Lee
You
was-
saw that. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Marty
I was-
Gallagher's written about that for
I
us.
was
It
right.
a-
I was right in front of Lee when it happened.
Oh, God.
You know, couldn't believe it.
What kind of bar was that? Just out of curiosity.
I think it was the old Texas Power Bar.
And
you know,
the
with
pin
the
had
short
sheared in the
the-
end of the sleeve. I guess.
No, the short sleeves didn't have enough room with all the weight on there.
The collar popped off. That's
They-
what it was.
They had turned the collar backwards
Right.
to try to get a bite on the bar,
It just-
and the collar popped off.
Wasn't enough metal in
Right.
metal on metal contact.
Right.
Yeah. Oh God, nobody was killed.
No.
Amazing.
And he came back and got it after that.
Yeah. And that was
1003.
1,003. Yeah.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, you did know Jim Cash.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about Jim.
I trained with Jim several times.
Tell us about Jim.
Jim was Jim had a lot of personal problems at the time. I think he was going through a divorce.
Jim had a reputation of having a very short temper.
Yeah. He was into a lot of recreational drugs, and I mean, he would come to the gym all messed up and try to train and tripping over benches and stuff like that. You know, he was going through a bad time in his life.
Yeah. Well, it's too bad. He was. I'll never forget the 834 at 220.
Yeah.
That was amazing deadlift.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody had ever even heard of anything like
Unbelievable
that
deadlifter.
at the time.
I saw him do 700 pounds for 10 reps one time on the deadlift in the gym.
God Almighty, that's amazing.
Dead
pulling
stop
car.
deadlifts too, not
Real
touch and go.
deadlifts. Real deadlifts.
Yeah.
Oh God. What about Waddington? You knew Waddington.
Dave
at,
Waddington, the Wad.
at Pacifico's, right?
Yeah, well, actually, I got to know Dave. I got to know him a little bit when I was at Pacifico's because I was competing around all those guys all the time.
He was at Black's at the time.
Yeah, he was at Black's Health World.
Right.
And I got to know him a little bit better whenever I was competing with the Black's Health World team. Matter of fact, we drank a bottle of Jack Daniels together in Hawaii.
How long did that take?
I don't recall.
Not that long.
It was a lot of fun. I roomed with Ted Arcidi at that meet.
Oh God, tell us about Ted. Ted, for those of you that don't remember Ted was a big bench presser back at the time, and then went into professional wrestling.
Yep.
And had a little career with the.
Ted was absolutely crazy. We roomed together the whole time over in Hawaii for that whole week, and he would get bored really easy and just come up with these off-the-wall things to do. Like one day I came up to the room, and he was standing at the window. We were on the 10th floor, and he had the window open, and he had gone down to the corner market and bought a couple of cartons of eggs, and came up to the 10th floor and opened the window and was throwing them at people out of the window.
At humans.
Yeah, to see if he could hit them.
God almighty, what a...
Another time...
Man, an egg going fast, though.
Another time,
hurt you,
we were walking through a food court at the mall, and there was some kids sitting in a booth eating their dinners. And Ted walks up to them and grabs their hamburger off their plate and shoves the whole thing in his mouth and starts growling at them.
At the kids?
And they were terrified.
Oh, no shit.
He looked like a big white gorilla. He was crazy.
Oh, George told me about Ted. My friend George Hector knew Ted pretty well, trained with him a little bit, and said that pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. I remember when he first broke Kazmaier's world record bench, he opened up, I think, with 666. Kazmaier held the record with 661, and Teddy opened up with 666 and missed it the first 2 times, and then got it on his 3rd attempt. And after he got it on his 3rd attempt, he stood up and ran and put his head through a wall. And then he threw a chair off the balcony into the highway. There was a highway right outside the hotel where we were competing, and he threw a chair out in the middle of the highway. Almost caused a huge accident.
Oh,
Gus
my God.
was pissed. He was a wild man. A lot of fun, though.
You heard from him recently? Is he still alive, or what?
I haven't talked to him in 30 years. I don't know what's going on with him. You know, just what I've seen in the magazines and stuff.
He was a wrestler for quite some time, wasn't he?
Well, I don't think his career in wrestling lasted that long. It was 2 or 3 years. I heard he got run off from wrestling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because of his temper. You know, because with the wrestling, their deal, you know, they have skits that they have to go through, and bad guy, good guy, and, you know, I'm going to win, you're going to win.
Right.
And
everybody has to agree.
He never
on
wanted
that.
to lose.
Maybe we need to edit that part about Ted out. I hate for him to show up here someday. Could happen.
He'd turn around and body slam everybody.
Oh, God, yeah. What about Luke Eames? Did you know Luke?
I met Luke at a contest one time, but I really didn't get to know him. No. He was a remarkable lifter.
Remarkable lifter. He had odd kind of proportions.
Yes.
He looked like a giant dwarf.
Yes.
You know, he was just, his ankles were this big around.
Yep.
And his wrist was this big around.
Yep.
And it just looked like a indestructible little fire plug of a person, but he was 5'8" or 9.
Yeah. He can move some weight, though.
Oh, God, yes. Amazing, strong guy. Oh, and you knew Ernie France, I guess, pretty well.
Oh, yeah. I've always referred to Ernie as my grandfather. I got to know Ernie early in the day when I was working for Pacifico, and I was running Larry's gym, Power Elite Fitness Center, and his mail order service, Pacifico Enterprises. And I was having to order suits and wraps and belts and stuff like that from all the dealers. And at the time, Ernie was a supplier in suits and belts and stuff. And that's how I got to know him at first. But then I got to know him over the years as a lifter and a coach. A great guy.
So he was one of the first guys in the suit business, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I still got one in the office in there.
In fact, I think he was the creator of the bench shirt.
He might have been.
I think he was the original, and I think he was the original creator of the heavy duty gear, like the canvas suits and stuff.
Yeah, I was out of it at that point, but I do remember an early shirt, probably
And I believe
85, 86 maybe, when that first shirt came into existence.
something like that.
Yeah.
But I know he was also the first one to come up with a monolift. He was the first designer of the monolift squat rack. So he's done a lot for the sport,
Right.
you know.
Mike McDonald has always fascinated me.
Mike
Did you know Mike?
I didn't really know Mike as a person. I got to talk to him a lot on the phone whenever I was with Pacifico,
Right.
and I was having to order things.
For those of you who don't know, Mike McDonald was a phenomenal bench presser at 198, almost 600.
181, 198, 220, 242, and 275.
And at 198, he'd benched 6
Yeah.
with 17-inch arms.
Yep.
It was the goddamnedest thing you have ever seen. This guy looks like a clerk. Doesn't look like a lifter.
Right.
And lays down on the bench and handles these big, gigantic, enormous 3 times body weight numbers.
Yeah.
Back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing, he was a specimen.
Late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. He owned a health food store where we got a lot of our vitamin supplements from.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him on the phone a great deal back then, you know, when I would order vitamin supplements. He taught me into using, he developed a bar that he called the McDonald bar.
I had one of those.
And he taught me into using one.
We tore up a bunch of our shoulders on the damn thing.
Yeah, I wound up using it back in the mid '80s down at Suncoast Gym in Florida, and wound up giving it to someone.
Yeah, that's what happened to most of them, I think.
Yeah.
There's just too much range of motion.
Yeah.
Shoulders are in enough danger from the bench press anyway without that kind of thing helping. And I don't know that that's what was responsible for his success. I doubt that it was.
That's what he claimed.
Yeah,
he claimed that was his only accessory work he did for the bench press. And by looking at him, it looked that way because you could tell it wasn't from anything else. He didn't do anything else.
There wasn't any amazing levers at work there.
No.
Just chimpanzee type muscle going on. He was just strong.
Yeah.
It was just real strong.
Yeah.
Buddy Duke. You'd mentioned Buddy in one of the previous segments in Florida. Buddy was
Georgia.
Georgia. I'm sorry, Georgia. Buddy was quite a lifter in 198s back then.
Yeah, the Iceman. He was very well known for his deadlift, and during the time that I moved down there to Georgia with him, I gave him some tips on the bench press and got his bench press up over 500 pounds. And he gave me some tips on the deadlift and got my deadlift up over 800 pounds.
Over 500 at 198?
Yes. No, he moved up to 220.
He wanted 220.
And I had moved up to 242.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and this all happened. His bench press went up 50 pounds. My deadlift went up 50 pounds. And this all happened over a 6-month period that I trained down there. So
That's amazing for advanced lifters to put on that much. He just knew how to pull.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Knew where the leverages were.
Mm-hmm. I want to pick your brain here about Doug Furnas. Doug may be one of the most underrated lifters in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
Doug died last year.
Yeah.
And it was a sad deal. And he wasn't in good shape when he died. Had some dementia and several other problems. And a guy that was that strong, that god-awful strong as a squatter, and was that good as a lifter and a trainer of lifters. Came from a family of athletes, rodeo guys.
Mm-hmm.
How well did you know Doug? Tell us about Doug?
I didn't know Doug that well. I just had met him at a few contests, and had really only spoken to him at a few contests. But as far as being around him as a person, I never really got to be around him.
How was he at the meet?
Very quiet, very focused, just off to himself, not talkative at all. You know, not one you could shoot the shit with at a meet. You know, he was just kind of isolated.
Focused.
Yeah.
Professional.
Yep. Very professional.
Right. Well, he had helped a lot of people with their training over the years, and we'd had an article written about him. Marty Gallagher knew him quite well and wrote an article about him. And I just wanted to get your impression of him.
Well, I competed against him in the '84 Senior Nationals, and at 242, and it was supposed to be a big showdown between me and Doug, and Doug wound up bombing out of the meet, I believe, that year, and it came down to me and Dave Jacoby, and that was a meet that I'd rather forget. It came down to the deadlift, and I pulled my first 800 deadlifts. I think I pulled an 804 deadlift, and I got a 2-to-1 call on it. Cost me the meet. And
what was the problem with it?
Well, I think the problem.
They say the problem.
I think the problem that I saw was Fred Hatfield's father-in-law was one of the judges.
Was one of the judges.
But and he's one of the ones that red lighted me.
Yeah.
But yeah, he told me I flinched my knee at the top of the lift.
What the hell does that mean?
I have no idea. And I broke that videotape. It was, you know, one of the old VHS videotapes.
Right.
I wore that tape out, watching it back and forth.
Trying to figure out what you
Trying to figure out what a flinch of the knee meant.
What the hell that even means? Flinched your knee. Show me in the technical rules where that's a cause for disqualification. Oh, God almighty.
It was crap like that made the APF develop. You know, it was calls like that made powerlifting split the way it's split today.
Right. There are some problems with that kind of strict judging. I mean, you have to have strict judging so that we know the record is the record. But by the same token, if the judging is so strict that legitimate lifts don't get passed, people get pissed off.
Exactly.
And I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about it. You know, it's going to be a problem in every sport that requires judges. So I guess the proper thing to do is err on the side of strict. Because to err on the side of the lifters, that's where we have squats like this now. And the thing evolves rapidly in the wrong direction if you do it the other way.
Yeah.
Tell me about John Black. How well did you know John?
You know, John was the coach of Black's Health World and sponsored me at several events over the years. I think I was with him 2 years, and talked to him a lot on the phone, was around him a little bit at his gym. Was at the time I knew him, and I think he is still today, very, very religious guy. Did a prison ministry, traveled all over the country doing prison ministries and, you know, teaching inmates how to train properly and work out and eat right and stuff, try to eat right in prison.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, but seemed like a really good guy. You know?
He sponsored a big team.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of money on you guys.
Oh yeah, yeah. Paid he'd pay all our expenses, you know, gas and airfare, whatever. Pay our entry fees.
And food and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a tremendous expense for a full team.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know,
especially a powerlifting gym.
Well, yeah, a powerlifting that doesn't generate a lot of money anyway.
Right.
He was digging into his own pocket for that. And as much as you assholes eat, you know, that had to have gotten expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh God, Jack Sedaris. Was he on Blacks?
Yeah, Jack was on Black's team. He was one of his good lifters. Matter of fact, funny story about Jack was I competed in the '83 YMCA Nationals, and Jack was competing in there, and we were standing in line for weigh-in, to go weigh in, because back then you had to weigh in right before you competed. There was no 24-hour weigh-ins. And Jack was in the beginning of the line, and he was wearing we were all standing there in our underwear, and Jack was wearing some Superman underwear. And, everybody was kind of giggling about that. And, here's this guy in his 30s wearing Superman underwear. Superman. And Pacifico goes up to him and goes, "Hey, Jack, I bet you $100 my kid beat you." And Jack goes, "You're on." He let him brew a minute. Larry comes back and goes, "Watch this. Hey, Jack, I bet you $500 my kid beat you." He looks at his buddy. "You're on."
Slightly less confident this time.
He lets him brew a few minutes more, and he goes, "Watch this." He goes, "Hey, Jack, I bet you $1,000 my kid's gonna beat you." He goes, "What the hell's going on here?"
Trying to round him up, weren't you? Oh God.
That was funny. That was a great meet. You talk about tight. I competed. That was I think my second meet at 220, and between first and fifth place was only about 30 pounds.
God almighty.
Yeah, it was tight.
That is talent.
Yep.
That's talent. Yeah, we used back when we had one federation.
Oh yeah.
Mark Chalet is a controversial figure in powerlifting.
Yeah.
Tell us about Mark Chalet.
I knew Mark when he was a lifter. We were both working for Pacifico at the time. He was a manager of a New Life Fitness Center spa up in Kokomo, Indiana, and I was a trainer at a spa over in Richmond, Indiana. And once in a while we would meet up in Dayton and train together over in Dayton. And I can remember one particular time after we got through working out, we went out to have a few drinks, and me and Mark was sitting at a table, and Mark wore really thick glasses. And he was wearing those glasses at the time. He was weighing about 275. And this guy was looking at him, just kind of staring at him. And Mark picks up his glass, and he takes a bite out of his glass and starts chewing it up. Just staring at the guy, and blood's coming out of his mouth. I like to shit on myself.
Oh my God. Well, I hope he didn't swallow any of it.
No. He's one of the first, well, he is the first guy I ever seen deadlift 900 pounds. I saw him pull 900 pounds in the gym. And he only deadlifted once a month.
Once a month.
He would do accessory work the other 3 weeks and deadlift 1 week out of the month. Phenomenal. Just
That's amazing.
Phenomenal genetics. But as far as Mark the person, or Mark the political guy with the IPA and all that,
Right.
I don't really know him. I've kind of lost track of him after that time.
What about Steve Wilson? Steve's one of these guys that was a great lifter back in the day, and nobody remembers for some reason.
Yeah.
And he's one of that stable of guys that was just huge, powerful, consistent lifting. And if I'd said Steve Wilson, you wouldn't even know what sport I was talking about.
Yeah. I saw Steve a few years ago at the Arnold Classic, and that was probably the first time I had seen Steve in 25 years. And if he wouldn't have spoken to me first, I wouldn't have recognized him. He looked totally different. But super guy, real nice guy. He won the '83 Senior Nationals. I think he won the '82 Senior Nationals too, and won the World Championships. But we wound up rooming together at the World Championships in Gothenburg, Sweden, at the '83 Worlds. And never in my life have I heard anybody snore the way he snores. Oh my God.
What was he weighing at the time?
He probably went over there weighing around 250, and then had to cut way down to 242 during that week we were there. And
so he wasn't a super. You wouldn't.
No.
Oh, I remember George Hector snoring a long time ago. Oh, God Almighty! It sounded like a lawnmower that someone had left a lawnmower on in my other room. It was the damnedest
I remember getting up in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep due to the noise, and getting my pillow and going in the bathtub and sleeping in the bathtub.
Just to have a couple of layers of material between you and
get a door in between us.
Door and the wall of the tub.
The rooms were so small over there in Europe that when one of us would stand up to change clothes, the other one would have to lay in the bed because the room was so tight.
Oh, God.
It was small.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Stayed in a hotel room like that in New York City before, but you'd think they'd have more room in Sweden, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Ray Rigby, you and I were talking about Ray Rigby a while back. Ray Rigby was an Australian.
Yeah.
And
Bev Francis' coach.
He was the coach of Bev Francis. And Bev's kind of a controversial figure in powerlifting at the day. She came into the sport way stronger than any other human female anybody had ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ray Rigby was her coach. Now, we've got a series of articles written by Bill Starr up on the website about the 1968 Olympics, and Starr talks about Ray Rigby in the 68 Olympics as an Olympic lifter at the time. And you knew Ray a little bit, right?
Well, I sat next to him on the plane on the flight over to Sweden during the '83 Worlds, and I spent 12 hours next to him and got to talk to him a good bit. So that was really the only time I was ever around him. But yeah, we had a good conversation. Real good guy.
Yeah.
Real good guy. Very knowledgeable.
Oh, I'm sure. He'd been in both sports since the early days.
Yeah.
God, he's probably, I guess he's still alive.
I have no idea.
What an interesting guy he'd be to talk to.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. God almighty. Ray Rigby, big guy. I think he was a thrower at one time also, wasn't he?
I don't know. I don't remember him talking about, that. He was super heavyweight whenever I met him.
Right.
Yeah.
Big old giant guy. Speaking of plane rides, Marty tells me the story of having worked for Mike Lambert in Powerlifting USA, and was one of his riders, had been working for him for a number of years, and they were going over to Europe for a Worlds to cover the thing, and Marty sat next to Mike the whole way over, and Mike didn't speak with him one time. Didn't even address him.
Why does that not surprise me?
What a strange deal. What a strange guy. Mike was the glue for the sport.
Oh my God! Powerlifting USA was the Bible.
That was the only that held the sport together. It was the only reference we all had. It was our
when I was in high school,
our grounding place.
Even when I was in college, I was the kid in the back of the class with the textbook with the Powerlifting USA inside.
Reading the magazine.
Every month they come in, man. I'd read it from top to bottom.
So Mike was quiet.
Oh yeah.
I talked to Mike on the phone over the years. I never met him. Talked to him on the phone over the years. Very quiet, deliberate man.
Yes.
Very deliberate, very calculating kind of a guy.
Yeah.
But
seems like he always thought about what he was going to say before he said it.
Not a humorous person.
No. Very dry personality.
Very dry. But the work he did to hold the sport together is just.
Oh my God.
Boy, I guess the internet has made all that unnecessary at this point. But back during the day, back in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't any other resource, and we all depended on that magazine. Nobody knew when the hell the meet was.
Yeah.
The meet results. There was no other way to get the information. And he provided the glue for the sport of powerlifting all over the world, single-handedly, for a very, very long period of time. And the demise of the demise of that magazine, I've got some issues in there when it was just a little bitty format stapled together in a newsletter.
The very first magazine I seen was about this big, and it had Doc Rhodes on the cover. Remember Doc Rhodes? Doc Rhodes.
Yes, I do.
Doc Rhodes is from my area down there. He's from
Mississippi.
Gulfport, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, he used to sponsor us whenever I was first coming out. Rhodes Club Fitness. He sponsored us. Very, very nice guy.
Yeah, he was a 181 pound
165.
165. Yeah. I remember he was a lightweight guy.
650 pound deadlift. 165.
And a master's lifter, I believe, and he was quite a bit older than
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I remember Doc Rhodes. I'd never met the guy, but I sure remember. See, all of these guys, you know, we again, Powerlifting USA introduced us to all of these lifters from all over the world and all over the country, and I read about them so much, watched their meet results, and read about them in that magazine. It just got to the point where you thought you knew these people. Yeah. Because it was literally my whole entire life.
Right.
For many years. And yours
too.
too, and you understand exactly what I'm talking about. It just, this stuff means so much to us that it's hard to make people understand, these kids that grew up in the internet that have got access to all this information. And we were so thirsty for it, and we couldn't obtain it anywhere else.
Yeah.
So anybody else you'd like to talk about? Think of anybody I've left
John
out?
Topsaglu was a fairly good lifter.
John Topsaglu was with you guys in Pacifico.
Yeah, when I was up there in Ohio. Really good 165er, just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. I have no idea whatever happened to him. You know, I left Ohio. I never knew of him competing anymore after that. I don't know what happened.
Well, this disappearance of lifters is kind of common. You remember Chip McCain?
Yeah.
Chip McCain, one of the greatest lifters of all time, 198, 220. Could squat anything he could walk out of the rack and get set up with. Squat well over 8 as a 220er. Hell's 198er, in fact. Goes missing off of a boat off of Catalina Island.
Really? I never heard this story.
Southern California. They just went out, they were at a fishing charter or something like that, and the guy just disappeared off the boat, never came back home. Never found him.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it said that happened. Oh, God, that's back in the 90s.
Wow.
And, yeah, that was one of those, you talk about a guy that goes missing, that's no shit the case there.
I never heard that.
Yeah, it's an amazing deal. Amazing deal. I think when Furnas died last year, it was kind of a shock to a lot of the old guard.
It was a very big shock to me. I had just spoke to him on the internet a couple of years before that. I just happened to be doing a Google search on the internet of old names, just like we're doing now, and I Googled his name and was able to locate an email address for him through WWE, and called him.
Right.
And he was like, "Where'd you get that number from?" And he was all upset. But
God. What a loss. Well, Joe, I sure do appreciate this.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
I mean, once again, it's just the fact that we've got the resources to do this, and that I get to meet you and talk to you has been a big treat for me.
Thank you.
And I really do appreciate your coming out here and agreeing to be on this interview with us.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
I've enjoyed it.
We appreciate you people for watching us here on the Starting Strength series. Bye-bye.